This video is brought to you by Nvidia, market leaders in cutting-edge GPU hardware that delivers unparalleled performance in new and upcoming games like Stormgate, Throne and Liberty, Marvel Rivals, and Black Myth Wukong. Stick around to the end of the video to learn more about how Nvidia's hardware and technology will transform the way you play. Gamers, I regret to inform you that it is officially Joever. And I'm not talking about Biden, by the way, though that is literally the definition of Joever. No, I'm talking about Concord, the next live service from Sony HQ, much hyped, moderately marketed, and showing absolutely every sign of being dead on arrival. A fate that has befallen precious few Sony games over the past decade, though there was of course Destruction All-Stars, but we do try to forget about that one. Now look, let's be clear, I've been rooting for Concord, or more accurately, I've been keeping an open mind. That reveal trailer with Dollar Store Guardians of the Galaxy, not a fan of that. The promise of weekly cutscenes, not really a fan of that either. But a new shooter from a bunch of people who previously worked on Halo, Call of Duty, and Destiny, backed by Sony's considerable financial investment, yeah, I was interested in that. And the playing of it wasn't bad either. I played the closed beta last week and did an impressions video on it, link below the like button. TLDR, it's pretty good. The gunplay is solid, the hero kits are very well designed and they're super fun. It walks a fine line of being deep but still accessible. It's definitely got a lot going for it. But it was also pretty clearly not ready for launch. There were significant balance issues across the heroes, there was no levers penalty for competitive modes, the game modes and maps were really dull and needed a lot more to jazz them up, and there were a bunch of really confusing half-baked systems rolling around in there that felt like they needed months more work before they were ready. Most alarming of all were the player counts for that closed beta. Now we don't have any PSN data, and that's important since the game was playable for anyone with a PS Plus account, so hopefully there was a decent player count there because there certainly wasn't on Steam. It peaked at around 1,100 players, which is not good considering that when you pre-ordered this title you actually got a total of 5 codes, 1 for you and 4 to give away to your mates. But hey listen, that was a closed beta. That was for the true believers only. Surely there would be vastly more interest in an open beta. No pre-order required, absolutely anyone with a PC at minimum spec and an internet connection can log in and play the game for free, no strings attached. Like the Rohirrim at the top of that mountain, surely the players will come, right? No. Concord's open beta went live on Thursday of last week. On Steam, it peaked at just 2,300 players. 2,300, let's put it this way. The release of a shill-up video gets more concurrent people rocking up than does the release of the next first-party Sony game. And do you know how bad my content is? That is a low bar to clear, and Sony have been unable to clear it here. It is an especially black eye for Sony given that they bought the studio that made this game. It's one thing to agree to publish it, it's quite another to put that studio on your balance sheet. This was a big bet and it is not paying dividends. Because yeah, 2,300 people is bad, like very, very bad. And it's doubly bad because there was a lot of chatter, including from people like myself, that this game ought to go free to play because that's the only chance it's got of getting the player base it needs to sustain it. Well, this weekend was essentially free to play. In fact, it was the most free to play it will ever be since there was no in-game spending enabled during this beta. Even then, it still couldn't pull anything close to the sort of numbers that might give this game a shot. Now, at the time of writing, neither Firewalk Studios nor Sony have issued any comment on this. They haven't crowed about big player counts on the PSN, they haven't hinted that they may be reconsidering the launch timeline or business model for this, nothing. Radio silence, but you gotta imagine that everyone is in crisis meetings right now because Sony dropped a packet on this, and there's every reason to suspect this is gonna launch with a max player count of a few hundred people, as the fear of a self-fulfilling prophecy stops people from laying down the $40 needed to purchase this video game. I've said it before, but I'll say it again now, I really think Concord needs a big chunky delay. I think the game is not ready for launch and it would benefit from more dev time. Most importantly, I think the business model is not fit for purpose, and if this is ever going to have a shot, then a pivot to free to play feels almost essential at this point. I really want Concord to succeed because honestly, I like what I played and I think it deserves to do well. I think there's a real chance that this could find a community of people who are into this, and if Sony are willing to underwrite it for a few years, it could grow the same way that like Sea of Thieves did for Microsoft or Fallout 76 did for Bethesda. There's a foundation here that's worth sticking with, so I hope Sony are willing to pump the brakes on this launch timeline, give Firewalk some more time to make some big changes, and maybe we all get ourselves a shiny new hero shooter to be excited about in 2025. It's a long shot, but hey, I'm ever the optimist. Speaking of live services that went from pretty rough to industry leading, Digital Extremes held their annual TennoCon this past week. Your boy was invited, but sadly I couldn't get over to beautiful London, Canada, as I'm making the trip to Gamescom very soon, so I couldn't justify the trip. But a lot of other people went and they had a blast. Two big ticket items during the show. The first was a deep dive look at Warframe 1999, a new experience coming to the game toward the back end of the year. I originally thought this would be just a standalone one and done thing, but DE say that this is actually the beginning of a whole new way to play Warframe. Quote, featuring characters, enemies, weapons, and vehicles that are both thrilling and strangely familiar, this is Warframe like you've never experienced it before, end quote. As for the 22-minute gameplay deep dive, it looked pretty sick, finding an art style that marries Warframe's weird, bulbous futurism with something that feels grounded in the late 90s setting. It also has a romance system, a first for the series, and voicing these romanceable characters is a veritable who's who of voice talent from games like Baldur's Gate 3 to Final Fantasy XIV to Cyberpunk and more. It really does feel like an incredibly ambitious enlarging of the game, and I for one am always glad to see how willing DE are to take risks. Not all of them pay off, mind you, but it keeps Warframe feeling fresh nearly a decade after it was first released, and that is no small feat. The other thing showcased during TennoCon was a proper look at DE's first new game since Warframe. I'm referring of course to Soulframe, and no, it is not a Souls-like, a point the dev team apparently agonized over when naming this thing. It is instead a third-person melee action game that takes its cues from more generalist action games than Souls-likes, and also from Warframe itself, since this one will be a free-to-play game, and you get the feeling that at least some of the progression and monetization stuff will be lifted and dropped from Warframe. So during the show, DE showed 17 minutes of gameplay, some impressive art design and a great setting here, but when it came to the combat side of things, it got a little wonky. Just take a look. So this trailer on YouTube has about a 50% dislike ratio at this point, and it's not difficult to guess why. This is a melee action game where the melee combat looks bad. Like, let's be real, the animation work here feels almost placeholder, and if it is placeholder, then it just feels like a thoroughly bad idea to show it because it seriously upset the narrative around Soulframe, a game that people were really excited about given Warframe's veteran dev team are working on this, but now a lot of that excitement has turned to confusion and or concern as this trailer gave little cause for optimism. It is important to keep in mind that the game is in development and surely this combat will improve, but it feels like it has a long way to go, and this game releases into open beta in a few months' time. Much like Warframe itself, it seems like DE are going to be building the airplane while it's in flight. Let's hope they can pull it off a second time. One last tidbit from TennoCon, Soulframe game director and DE CEO Steve Sinclair took an interview with VGC. Man, that's a lot of acronyms. Anyway, in it, he publicly mused about the quick fate that befalls many newly launched live service games. Quote, they think the release is make or break, and it's not. They have a financial way to be persistent, and they never do it. It comes out, doesn't work, and they throw it away. Isn't that a shame when you put so many years of your life into iterating on those systems and building technology or building the start of a community, and because the operation costs are high, you get terrified when you see the numbers drop and you leave. We've seen this with amazing releases that I think have massive potential, and I think they eject too soon, end quote. It's an interesting comment to make, given that last year, Digital Extremes did exactly what Sinclair is describing to Wayfinder, an MMO-light looter shooter developed by Airship Syndicate, but published by DE. Wayfinder had a disastrous launch, but it definitely had a lot of potential. Regardless, DE pulled up stumps in November last year, leaving Airship with no way to continue live service or even online support. Rather heroically, Airship managed to really turn things around, actually made Wayfinder an offline game, pulling out all of the in-game spending stuff and enabling peer-to-peer multiplayer, and now it's 84% very positive on Steam, up from lows of like 20% around the time of launch, or even a mixed 50% once the game managed to find its feet a few months after that. A great result for Airship here after being left in the lurch by DE. Incidentally, we reached out to Airship for their response to Sinclair's comments about how live service games are too quickly abandoned, and an Airship representative had this to say, quote, we agree that we are proud of what we achieved converting Wayfinder to a co-op action RPG. We think it's a better game for it, and looking at our Steam reviews, our players agree, end quote. Good on them, I say. Pivoting now to Microsoft news, you guys remember that Game Pass price hike and service offering change up from a few weeks back? Long story short, the price of Game Pass went up across the board, and a newly added standard tier will no longer have day one new release games. You'll need to front for the ultimate tier to get those on console, or the Game Pass on PC tier if PC is your preferred platform. A little bit of pushback on this one, but not too much to be honest with you, and I suspect the reason for that is something that I discussed on the podcast when we were all talking about it together. $20 a month for a massive back catalogue of older games, a healthy smattering of day one new releases, including AAA releases like Indiana Jones and Call of Duty and Doom Dark Ages, plus you get xCloud allowing you to play games on basically any device with a screen. That seems like a pretty good-ish deal. It doesn't feel like Microsoft had taken us for a ride, at least not yet. A few more price hikes, then sure, absolutely. But at 20 big ones, it feels broadly reasonable given how much you're getting in return. I may feel that way, but the US FTC certainly does not. The FTC's had a bee in their bonnet about Microsoft ever since the Activision Blizzard acquisition process began, and when the FTC achieved basically none of their stated goals, they committed themselves to remaining a thorn in Microsoft's side. Case in point, this week the FTC filed concern over the Gamepass price hike, arguing that it was a degraded product and it contradicted Microsoft's earlier promise of no price hikes relating to the acquisition. Of course, that is an easy sidestep for Microsoft because they can just argue that the price hike isn't because of the acquisition, but other factors. Sure enough, Microsoft responded to the claims being like, nuh-uh, and honestly, they have a very strong case, so it's highly unlikely that the FTC are going to get anywhere with this one. Sticking with Microsoft a while longer, the Xbox marketing lead for Europe, Middle East, and Africa, Michael Flatt, took an interview with a publication called Marketing Week, and I bet he wished he hadn't. There he gave a rather frank admission about Microsoft's commitment to those regions. Quote, "We adopt what I would call a more fiscally responsible approach to media investments. We're not blessed with huge media budgets, so we have to be quite scrappy really, and quite tenacious to fight for funds that would probably go somewhere else," end quote. It's a surprising admission because it comes from an actual Xbox employee in a position to know, and it suggests that Microsoft does not invest properly in these regions. This has long been speculated, most recently by Tom Warren of The Verge, when people got very mad at him recently when he reported that Microsoft were planning to wind back their investment in Europe, essentially vacating the field so they could focus more on the US. That is an unconfirmed report, but you do have Xbox's actual EMEA head confirming that compared to Sony, the money faucet here is set to trickle rather than spray. One last piece of Microsoft news, and it's a good one. They cancelled that god-awful Halo TV show. I know we shouldn't celebrate when things like games, TV shows, or movies get canned, but this show was so unbelievably bad, like horrendously bad on every level, with absolutely no respect for the source material whatsoever. It feels like a relic of a bygone era where the showrunners somehow thought that they knew better than the game makers and fans that brought this franchise to where it was. Like, you think you know something Shigeru Miyamoto didn't? Whoever it was that directed the 1994 Super Mario Bros. Movie? Wait, who was that anyway? Anna Jankel and Rocky Morton. Huh, okay. Suffice it to say, that movie was not great for their careers, hence the fact that we never heard from them ever again. Again, we are getting sidetracked. Point is, the Halo TV show has not been renewed by Paramount, and given the significant production costs for it and the overwhelming negative feedback from Halo fans and casual audiences, this one seems as donezo as Reach itself. Variety are reporting that Xbox and Amblin TV do want to shop this around a bit. Hopefully they find someone willing to back a Halo TV project on the condition that it is a full reboot that pretends like this original series 1 and 2 never even existed. If you go full Men in Black memory flash on this one, I will be on board. A quick lightning round to finish off, and this one's a nice segue coming off that Halo TV story. While that's getting canned, the Fallout TV show is drowning in Emmy nominations. It got 16 nominations last week, including Outstanding Drama Series and Best Actor for our main man, Walton Goggins. It is unlikely the show is going to bring home many of those 16 nominations, but hey, it's nice to be considered, and honestly, it's a great show, so it's fantastic to see it get this sort of recognition. The review bombing for Apex Legends is going swimmingly. Recently, EA announced some truly horrendous changes coming to the Battle Pass, effectively doubling the cost of it and removing the ability to earn it for free in-game. As a result, consumers utilize one of the few tools at their disposal, Steam reviews. The game currently sits at an overwhelmingly negative 8% on Steam, with 70,000 reviews in the past 30 days alone. I often get shit for being broadly in support of review bombing because, yeah, it can be misused for bad faith shit, absolutely. But most of the time, it's consumers rightly calling out bullshit and hopefully hurting a company's bottom line whilst doing so. No response from EA or Respawn to any of this yet, so it looks like they are going to try and grit their teeth and bear it. Let's see how long that lasts. The First Ascendant has removed its clearly plagiarized icons ripped straight from Destiny 2. In the patch notes, the game director penned a little missive saying, quote, "The First Ascendant has been developed with deep affection and respect for various looter shooters, and we take feedback regarding other similar games very seriously. Through this hotfix, we are trying to reflect the unique identity of The First Ascendant. We will continue to improve this game for fans of the genre," end quote. Man really went out of his way not to say the words Destiny 2 in that. Good job. You have no idea how over it had to be for us to be this back. That is the general vibe in the Team Fortress community right now, who are feeling buoyant after Valve effected a massive banning spree intended to get rid of all the game-ruining bots. It coincides with a summer update mostly consisting of community-made maps, items, and hats. As a result, not only have reviews shot back up to very positive after hitting like mostly negative just a few months ago, but the player count is averaging around 100,000 concurrent players. That's literally 100 Concords. Damn, man, that feels really harsh. Moving right along, some good and bad news for Warner Brothers, maybe, I don't know. The studio that made Multiverses has just been acquired by Warner Brothers. That's a great sign that the game is doing well and that Warner Brothers have high hopes for its future. Probably a little concerning for the developers who now find themselves under the employ of the fickle and mercurial David Zaslav, but that's a problem for another day, for those people at least. It's very much a today problem for the upwards of 50 staff who were working at NetherRealm Studios, makers of the Mortal Kombat and Injustice games, who now find themselves out of the job. According to multiple LinkedIn posts, NetherRealm apparently shuttered their entire mobile team, which is reported to be around 50 people. Those numbers are not confirmed, and we've reached out to Warner Brothers for comment, but we haven't heard back at the time of recording. NetherRealm ran 3 live service mobile games, but now that's down to just 2. Mortal Kombat Mobile and Injustice Mobile survive, but Mortal Kombat Onslaught will be shut down very soon. That's sort of like an RPG spin on the Mortal Kombat universe, and as of October of this year, it will be no more. That does neatly segue us into some good labor news. Staff at Bethesda Game Studios are unionizing, and it's not just a handful of people in 1 or 2 teams or whatever, it's over 230 staff, making it the first wall-to-wall union within any Microsoft-owned entity. The staff put out a statement saying, quote, "Joining in solidarity with our fellow members at ZeniMax Workers, 1BGS, and all of CWA Union, we push for increased job security, compensation transparency, and flexibility to continue creating the games we love. As we work towards our first contract with Microsoft, we hope you'll join us in voicing your support as we serve as an example for all into the next era of game development," end quote. Microsoft has recognized the union, so hopefully this helps protect Bethesda staff from the sort of cruel and needless job cuts that corporate leaders love to dish out whenever the angle of the line isn't steep enough. Some quick sales data to top you off. You Americans are crazy about your college football. EA Sports College Football saw 2.2 million players during its early access release alone. These people had to pay $100 to get into that early access, by the way, and there were 2.2 million of these people. Absolutely insane. Mind you as well, this game is only available on current-gen consoles, so no last-gen consoles and no PC. Just absolutely wild. Speaking of big numbers, the Overwatch franchise just hit over 100 million lifetime players. Obviously, going free-to-play would have bolstered that significantly. We all like to joke that Overwatch is dead, because let's be real, it's a funny joke. But the reality is that Overwatch is still very much alive. On Steam alone, it's averaging 45,000 peak concurrent players each day, and that's just on Steam, when surely most people playing Overwatch are playing through Battle.net, and that doesn't even include console numbers. Overwatch may have lost a lot of its brand cash from the years past, but it's still going strong, and with numbers like that, you can expect Microsoft to stick with it for many years to come. And yes, it felt just as weird to say that as it did for you to hear it. And finally, Ubisoft held an earnings call, and apparently they're in pretty good shape. 15% increase in sales, driven largely by live service revenue. Interestingly, console revenue still accounts for around 50% of Ubi's total revenue, an important metric to keep in mind whenever we're talking about PC player counts for various games. X-Defiant defiantly hit 10 million players despite the tough task of going head-to-head with Call of Duty, so that's a solid enough result. The Crew Motorfest is apparently doing pretty well too, no doubt helped by the fact that Ubisoft turned off the service for the original Crew, so that community really had no choice if they wanted to keep playing the game. Hell, even Skull and Bones is doing well, maybe, apparently, if you believe what Ubisoft says. They say that average revenue per user is strong, but they stop short of how many users there are. So if there are like 15 people playing this game, but each one of them are buying a season pass, then Ubisoft is chalking that one up as a win. Speaking of Ubi, one piece of news that broke overnight, Ubisoft has issued a statement on the criticisms that Assassin's Creed Shadow has been getting about its treatment of history. It's a long story to properly recount, but basically some people, including Japanese people, take exception to presenting one of the game's protagonists, the African-born Yosuke, as a samurai, when the historical record on his status does not definitively specify that he was, in fact, a samurai. Some historians argue that he was, others argue that it's unlikely or at least unclear. There have also been some issues with things like architecture and hairstyles and etiquette and more, where Japanese people have pointed out that Ubisoft's attention to detail on those things has been poor. Ubisoft's statement makes clear that Assassin's Creed games are not trying to be accurate reflections of history, but rather historically inspired fiction, which yeah, is true, since AC Games have always taken plenty of creative license with their treatment of historical figures and events. However, Ubisoft did apologize at one point in the statement, saying, quote, "We acknowledge that some elements of our promotional materials have caused concern within the Japanese community. For this, we sincerely apologize," end quote. This part very likely refers to an incident where Ubisoft used the flag of a historical reenactment society without their consent, with the group demanding that Ubisoft remove the flag from a collector's edition art book of the game, a demand that Ubisoft eventually acquiesced to. Ubisoft say they'll continue to evolve the game during development, but didn't confirm what changes they'll be making. I'm sure we'll continue to hear plenty more about all this stuff in the lead up to launch. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, EVO 24 happened in Las Vegas, the biggest EVO tournament ever in terms of number of participants, showing that the fighting scene is doing pretty damn well. A raft of fighting game announcements dropped during the course of the event, like Multiversus Season 2, which adds Samurai Jack and Beetlejuice for some reason. Guilty Gear Strive is getting its first ever guest character, and it's a pretty damn good one, Lucy from the Cyberpunk Edge Runners anime. Not bad at all. Somehow, Hayashi returned, announced as the third DLC fighter for Tekken 8. This guy just can't stay dead, it seems. Street Fighter 6 released a gameplay trailer for Terry Bogard, the SNK crossover character who will join the Street Fighter 6 roster in the near future. Speaking of Street Fighter, Victor Punk Woodley delivered the first ever win in EVO history for someone hailing from the United States. That's 20 years of Street Fighter at EVO, and this is the first US win. Big congrats to Punk for that one. Moving on to non-fighting game announcements now. Back in the day, there was a series of games called Chibi Robo. They were on the GameCube, Wii, DS, and 3DS, and it was a household-based 3D action series with plenty of charm. The team behind that series didn't hold the rights to it, so they reformed under a new banner, and they've committed to making a spiritual successor, which they're calling Co-Robo. This one is very early on. In fact, it's just a Kickstarter right now, so if you're at all interested in getting in on the ground floor and helping this team out, you can sling them a few bucks to help them get on their way. A new Devolver game appears. This one is called Force Strike, and it's a sort of puzzle combat game where you can plan out your fights by doing kind of like mock battles in your head before committing to the real thing. I've played a few games like this in the past, like that John Wick game and Fights in Tight Spaces. They're always a good time, and this one has a simple but effective pixel art style that's really working. No date for this one yet, but it's arriving sometime in 2025. Biggest announcement for the week is almost certainly Splitgate 2. Now this is a really interesting one. The original Splitgate launched and went absolutely nowhere for the longest time until suddenly it got picked up by some streamers, and then we were off to the races, with the title amassing some 22 million downloads after that. This all happened before the games industry started to contract, at a time when investor money was freely flowing. As such, the dev team behind Splitgate raised a boatload of cash, and with that in hand, they then said they'd be ceasing updates on Splitgate 1 so they could focus on making Splitgate 2. They wanted to take the game to a whole new level, so they effectively let Splitgate 1 die so that Splitgate 2 might live. They've now just officially revealed Splitgate 2. It was just a cinematic trailer here, so no actual gameplay, but they did confirm a 2025 release date. I don't know about this one, man. I worried that the decision to drop the first game was kind of hastily made. Yeah, this one will be in Unreal Engine 5, but people didn't play Splitgate for the graphics, they played it because it was fun. Let's hope the franchise hasn't lost too much momentum, since it does feel like the market has shifted considerably since the salad days of 2019. Finally, the team behind Orcs Must Die are back at it with Orcs Must Die Death Trap. This is the 5th game in the series, so people are obviously buying them. If you're unfamiliar, it's a very competent tower defense game, and the latest entry is adding 4-player co-op supported by matchmaking, which is a nice addition. No date for this yet, but it is out sometime next year. One delay announcement this week, and it's for Ubisoft's upcoming mobile release, or at least some of them. Rainbow Six Mobile and The Division Resurgence are like one-to-one ports of the main games that they're based on, but they're of course mobile games. I actually played The Division Resurgence, and I can confirm that, yeah man, they really nailed getting The Division onto a phone to a degree that I was kind of a little bit stunned by. I expect the in-game spending will be horrendous because that's how it is with all mobile games, but from a gameplay perspective, yeah, it was very solid, absolutely, no doubt about it. Anyway, these were intended to release sometime this year, but Ubisoft has now delayed both of them to sometime in 2025. So what came out last week? Well, quite an interesting slate of releases actually. Kicking things off is Bow Path of the Teal Lotus. It's a lovely looking 2.5D action platformer inspired by Japanese mythology. This one landed really well, 82% very positive on Steam, and a mighty 84 on OpenCritic. GameRant loved this one, scoring at 4.5 stars and saying, quote, "But for those exhausted by drawn-out AAA experiences, Bo's lean nature might just be a breath of fresh air. Ultimately, when the most significant criticism someone can make about a game is that there isn't enough of it, that ought to be taken as a fairly good sign. If you have even a passing interest in the Metroidvania or platforming genres, Bo Path of the Teal Lotus is not a game you can afford to miss," end quote. Dungeons of Hinterberg was another very promising looking indie title, and it too delivered in spades. 91% very positive on Steam at the moment, and a strong 80 on OpenCritic. PC Gamer scored this one an 84, which is quite a high score for them, and they said of it, quote, "A game that's satisfyingly complex despite its outward simplicity. The strict time division of the days allows for a comfortable balance between social elements and exploration, and combat's occasional monotony is easy to ignore with so many fun puzzles and beautiful environments," end quote. Really like what Rock Paper Shotgun had to say about it in their positive write-up, quote, "There's a climactic rush at the end of the game's 20-hour runtime, but for the majority, Dungeons of Hinterberg is wonderfully laid back. There are so many games that romanticize leaving your busy life and escaping to the wilderness, but here the topic is explored in an authentic and genuine way. There's a lesson here about how rest is fundamental to health and happiness, but I also love how the game communicates that. It's a gentle, reflective fantasy adventure that'll have you reaching for your hiking boots," end quote. Don't forget this one is out on Game Pass if you would like to give it a try. So too is Flintlock, The Siege of Dawn actually, but the reception to that one has not been as strong. It's sitting at a mostly positive 74% on Steam, and critics are even more down on it, putting it at a fair 70 on OpenCritic. Not a lot of variance in the scores here, with most outlets putting it a 6 or 7, like Press Start, who scored it a 6 and said, quote, "With the notable exception of Flintlock's wobbly combat fundamentals, there isn't much in here that is experience-breaking so much as consistently underwhelming. The cultural touchstones used to give Cayenne life can lead to some truly inventive visual touches as you explore settlements and discover increasingly gaudy armor sets, but when it all loops back into fairly rote, poorly communicated fantasy storytelling and limited exploration, no amount of aesthetic shine can catch the eye for long enough to sustain investment," end quote. Incidentally, Austin is just wrapping up his review of this one, and he was not a fan. Much like myself, he was quite looking forward to this one, but it just didn't do it for him. That review will be up later this week, so if you'd like to know the minute that is live, be sure to subscribe and ding the notification bell. While Austin's been working on that, I've been working on Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess. I actually needed a bit of a break from Destiny since it's all I've been playing for nearly a month now, and let me tell you, this one really delivered. I loved this. I loved it a lot, in fact. I don't think it's incredible, but it's beautifully composed and smartly tuned, and it's very earnest. It's hard to describe it briefly here, but it just feels a little bit special, and I really do like it a lot. It's great. I'll talk more about it later, but yeah, if you're on the fence, then please dive in. I promise you, you're going to enjoy it. Yeah, it's great. I'm far from the only person who thinks this, by the way. The game currently sits at 88% very positive on Steam, and critics have it at a strong 80 on OpenCritic. IGN scored this one an 8, saying, quote, "Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess is an exciting action strategy hybrid that left me yearning to know more about its inspirations and intricacies. The satisfying day-night structure of its stages evoked that overwhelming just one more thing feeling that easily had me losing track of time, and while it could occasionally be tainted by busy work-based management deeper in, the overall experience was a delightfully unique one," end quote. That Nintendo World Championships NES edition launched last week, and it landed kind of where I expected it to, which is in that kind of like 7 out of 10 zone. More than a few reviews commented that this just felt a little threadbare as a standalone boxed product, even one sold at a discount. Digital Trends put it well when they scored it a 3 out of 5 and said, quote, "While I'll surely continue to chip away at my best times, Nintendo World Championships NES edition feels more like practice than a big game itself. It's a great way to learn the basics of speedrunning, but the outlet for those acquired skills is in another castle," end quote. My advice, maybe wait for this one to eventually end up on the Nintendo Online subscription service, since it does kind of feel destined for that at some point. And finally, Conscript is a game we've been tracking for a while now, an Aussie-made game from a solo developer, a PS1-style survival horror experience set in the trenches of World War I. Great visual style, a great premise, everything going for it, and it appears to have delivered. No user reviews out for this one at the time of writing, but critics have it at a strong 79. Press Start scored it an 8 and said, quote, "It makes such an inspired decision in setting that everything else is icing on the cake, and even the stuff I don't adore still feels in service of what the developer is aiming to achieve in ratcheting the tension up several notches to create one of the most suffocating video games about war I've ever played," end quote. That's a cheap pickup, by the way. It's like $20, available on all platforms. A big congrats to the developer for a job well done. So what's coming out this week? Well, man, I'm not gonna lie to you, it is bleak out there. Not a lot dropping. Biggest release of the week is most likely gonna be Earth Defense Force 6, now finally hitting Western shores after launching in Japan back in 2022. It's definitely more Earth Defense Force, and I expect it'll do even better now thanks to Helldivers 2, which really put this sort of game on the map for a bunch of people who might not have otherwise taken interest in it. This one's headed to PlayStation and PC only, and it arrives tomorrow. A Ranger, a role-playing puzzle adventure, is a game that Lucy brought up in the podcast this week. Look forward to that episode going up on the channel over the weekend. A Ranger is basically old-school Zelda if it were also a grid-based puzzle game. Really tricky to explain without seeing it for yourself, but it looks very clever, and the art design is led by David Hellman, the person who did the classic Braid. Edge magazine got an early copy of this one, and they scored it an impressive 9 out of 10. It's headed to PC, PS5, and also mobile, courtesy of Netflix. So if you have a Netflix subscription, this is included in that subscription. Not bad at all. VR peeps, an actual video game is releasing this week. Haters will say it's fake, but it's true. The game in question is called Thrasher, and no, it is not a skateboarding game. It's actually the next game from the people who made the absolutely fantastic Thumper, a visceral rhythm game from a few years back. Thrasher is a different game, but it still has the same rhythm focus, psychedelic visuals, and a banging soundtrack. This one will be a MetaQuest exclusive when it launches later this week, but in December, this one will also arrive on Steam. And final release for the week is... tell you what, put this on your radar. I first saw Exhausted Man a few years back and immediately thought to myself, finally, a game that really gets me. Exhausted Man describes itself as a comedy puzzle game where you need to help a very, very tired person get through a crucial night. The biggest limitation? You are too tired to even stand, so you spend your entire time crawling around like some dorky carpet snake. Apparently you're like a software programmer of some shit and you need to debug while also being really tired. I'm sure any game developer watching this show knows that feeling. This just looks very silly, and honestly, I'm in the mood for that right now, so this works, and I was very happy to see that this one actually releases today on all platforms. At the very least, I do expect it'll make for some great TikTok fodder. Sort of free stuff time now, and much like the release list for the week, there really isn't much. In fact, the only thing on the docket is Epic, who right now are still giving away horror game Made of Skier and the excellent Arcade Paradise, but replacing those two tomorrow is the surprisingly excellent Fist Forged in Shadow Torch. This is a side-scrolling Metroidvania with some satisfying combat, some meaty Metroidvania progression, and some fantastic cyberpunk-inspired visuals. It's 88% very positive on Steam. It's a really solid game, definitely worth checking out if you haven't done so yet. Stop the presses! Late breaking news just as we were finalizing this episode. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, the one that released last year, is arriving on Game Pass today. That's pretty good, right? I mean, it's still a $70 game right now if you want to buy it, and it does have that campaign that you can play through, plus the multiplayer, of course. It's certainly not the most beloved entry in the series. I mean, it does sit at mostly negative 30% on Steam, but hey, it's on Game Pass, so you can just play the campaign for 7 or 8 hours and then you're done with it. That is available on Game Pass Console, Game Pass PC, and Game Pass Ultimate. For our feel-good story of the week, it feels right to turn our gaze towards EVO, an event that regularly produces absolutely insane, unmissable moments, and this year was no different. Highlight of the entire tournament has got to be Ryuji Hayashi, aka Hayao, and yes, that is his actual player portrait right there. He was playing for a top 6 Street Fighter 3 third strike spot, and he was playing his go-to, Hugo, a grappler who is by no means a top meta pick when it comes to third strike. Regardless, Hayao was making plays, and when he won a round, he liked to celebrate like this little Running Man dance here.
Oh, the Running Man!
Or the moment when he knew he'd won a round before the KO screen even appeared.
He already knows it! He's taking a walk! Bang!
However, I don't think anyone was prepared for what he pulled out next.
He's winning, Justin. He's winning.
It doesn't hurt?
Oh my God! That hurts me, brother!
At this point, I would like to inform you that this man is 41 years old, and he is still ranking in fighting game tournaments while doing the splits. This is what absolute peak performance looks like. To cap it all off, Hayao pulled out what was one of the best moments of the entire tournament, a play so good that is now being referred to as EVO Moment 38. Take a look.
Oh my God, no! 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 Okay.
He went past the SA3 worthless button.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Evo at its absolute finest. I'd love to attend one of these one day. Not as a competitor, mind you. I wouldn't make it past the registration before being laughed out of the building. But I always thought it'd be super fun to be part of that crowd. Either way, that's all I got for you this week. Always appreciate you stopping by. If you happen to have enjoyed yourself a little or a lot, then we'd love it if you could drop the video a like, help it spread far and wide across the algorithm, and don't forget to subscribe and ding that notification bell so you can come back next week and do it all over again. I'm off to play some Marvel Rivals now. That beta is available this week, and it's pretty easy to get into, so sign up if you're at all keen. Thanks again for watching, and a big thanks to this week's sponsor, NVIDIA. Interested in games like Stormgate, Throne and Liberty, Marvel Rivals, and Black Myth Wukong? If you answered yes to any of those, then you may want to check out what this video's sponsor NVIDIA is bringing to the table, because their GeForce RTX 40 series GPUs deliver super fast, super power performance thanks to not only their hardware, but also their advanced AI-enabled technology supporting it. It all starts with the hardware though. GeForce RTX 40 series GPUs deliver the raw processing power that enables faster frame rates, higher settings, and advanced settings like ray tracing. Black Myth Wukong, for example, will support full ray tracing, a setting that delivers the most realistic rendition of light that's possible in a video game. The games that do support this technology always look absolutely incredible, and GeForce RTX GPUs let you experience this game-changing setting. But NVIDIA GPUs aren't just about their hardware, they're also about the proprietary technology that NVIDIA uses to push that hardware to new heights. One of the most powerful tools that GeForce RTX 40 series GPUs support is DLSS 3. This actually uses AI to insert additional frames in between those that are natively rendered by your GPU. In many games, this will literally double your frame rate, sometimes even triple, no joke. Stormgate is one game that supports DLSS 3. This is an RTS from the people who worked on StarCraft and Warcraft in the past. It looks fantastic and it will ship day one with DLSS 3, so you can enjoy incredibly smooth performance even at higher resolutions and graphical settings. The other thing Stormgate supports is NVIDIA Reflex. This is a technology that significantly reduces input latency, something that is super important for competitive games like MOBAs or hero shooters. Speaking of which, did you know that Marvel Rivals will launch day one with both DLSS 3 and NVIDIA Reflex? It's true. It was recently confirmed and I'll be checking it out this week while the Marvel Rivals beta is running. NVIDIA did their own testing on this, which you can see here on screen, and DLSS 3 is delivering more than triple the frame rate, which is just absurd, backed up by NVIDIA Reflex, ensuring that you have the most snappy and responsive gameplay experience possible. This stuff is par for the course for NVIDIA though, who are constantly partnering with the biggest game makers and biggest games with the sole intention of delivering you the best possible gameplay experience. The highest settings, the smoothest frame rates, the most responsive gameplay, and the most realistic lighting. It's what NVIDIA's been working to deliver from day dot, and they won't be changing anytime soon. So if you'd like to jump in and get yourself an RTX 40 series GPU, I've left a link to the product page below. Thanks NVIDIA for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.